Welcome back to the second lesson of the day. Where we left it, we had talked about the production of a zygote from the fusion of a male and female gamete. We had said that as that zygote moves from the fallopian tube to the uterus, that it is multiplying all the time, and it is called an embryo. And after 8 weeks, it now looks like a little baby. So you now know my diagrams are the world's worst ever, but it will have little hands and little feet, and little head will be obvious, and it will be called a fetus. So we're going to talk about today the amniotic fluid and the placenta, their role in maintaining pregnancy. We are going to understand what happens in labor, and we're going to talk about some ways in which pregnancy might be prevented or ways in which we can aid pregnancy. So amniotic fluid is literally liquid, and this picture is of a baby that was born by cesarean section, and it is still in its amniotic sac, and you can see that there's fluid in there. So the whole point of it is that it surrounds the fetus, it actually protects them, it acts as a shock absorber, and it protects the fetus as the mom goes about her day. In terms of the placenta then, so when we talked about the female reproductive system, so fallopian tubes and uterus, and we said that an endometrium builds up. So this is, if fertilization doesn't happen, this endometrium is shed, and this is what we call a period. So once the embryo implants, it implants into this endometrium, and from that it produces the amniotic sac and the placenta. So the placenta is essentially a whole load of blood vessels, and these blood vessels connect to the embryo via the belly button. And the whole point of this is that the baby will be able to get glucose and amino acids into it via the oxygenated blood, and it will get the removal of waste in the deoxygenated blood. So things like carbon dioxide and urea will be able to be removed, so that will allow the baby to grow healthily. It's really important that the two blood supplies don't mix, because the mom and the baby may not be the same blood group, and while it would be okay for this particular pregnancy, it can impact subsequent pregnancies where the mom would build up antibodies to the baby's blood, and if the next baby had the same blood type, then it would see it as a sickness and the pregnancy wouldn't be able to be maintained. So this is what a placenta looks like after it's delivered. So it is a big, very big kind of blood clot, and up here you can see the umbilical cord coming out the top. So the whole point of the placenta is it nourishes the baby. It usually is against the walls of the uterus. In some pregnancies it can be very low down, it can cover the cervix, so then straight away that's a very high risk pregnancy, and the mom would have to have a cesarean to deliver that baby. And our belly buttons are proof of where our umbilical cords once connected. So the job of the placenta is to pass digested food. So we've done the digestion topic, so things like glucose, amino acids, vitamins, minerals, they will all get passed to the baby, as well as oxygen for respiration. And then waste products are removed, so urea that's made in the kidneys and carbon dioxide will go from the baby's blood into the mom's blood for disposal. So we're going to talk a little bit about childbirth now. I am going to show you this little video. So this is recorded in an aquarium in England, and it is the male seahorse that actually gives birth to the babies. So just as in female labour, the breathing happens faster and there are contractions will start. For the male seahorses, they change colour, so that's how they know that they're about to give birth if you're looking from the outside. There are 3 stages to labour, or 3 stages to giving birth. The first one is labour, so for human females, we have contractions will start, the cervix will dilate, so that just means it gets bigger because the baby's head is going to have to come through it, and the amniotic fluid will break. So that's called your waters breaking, or you may have heard it. And then the second stage is actually delivering the baby. So here is the second stage in childbirth, which is delivering of the baby. Now, in nature, seahorses would give birth in the ocean, and you have to imagine that one of the reasons why they have so many offspring is because there's probably some other organism now, if this was in the sea, eating these little baby seahorses. Seahorses don't go through the third stage of childbirth, which I will show you now in this animation.
During childbirth, the baby lies in the mother's uterus with his head pointing down towards the cervix. The first stages of labor begin with short, regular contractions of the uterus every few minutes, which continue until the mother's cervix is fully dilated. In the second stage of labor, the contractions become more forceful, more frequent, and more painful. As the baby's head starts to move down the vagina, the amniotic sac breaks and fluid is released. The top of the head appears at the entrance of the vagina and finally bulges out. This is the crowning of the head. The contractions which follow push the baby even farther down so that the head is delivered. The baby's eyes immediately begin to blink and the mouth makes sucking movements. The baby usually emerges facing the mother's back so that the head passes through the widest possible opening in the pelvic girdle. The head then turns so that the upper and then the lower shoulder follows. There is a final contraction and the baby slips out, still attached to the umbilical cord. The cord is then tied and cut. A painless operation because the cord is nerveless. The third stage of labor, in which the placenta, or afterbirth, is delivered, is usually complete about 15 minutes after the birth.
So, our 3 stages of birth. So, stage 1, the uterus contracts, the cervix dilates. So again, dilates just to get, means to get bigger. And if you've ever eaten Dairy the triangles, cheese triangles, well, one of those boxes is 10 centimeters, and that's how much the cervix dilates. And once the female is at that part, they are allowed to push. So at this point, the bag of amniotic fluid will burst, so they call it your waters breaking. If it happens before you start contracting, then you really should go to a hospital first. The second stage is actual delivery of the baby. So once you're 10 centimeters dilated and you push, the baby's head is pushed out through the vagina and into the world. And the third stage is the delivery of the placenta. So before the placenta can be delivered, the umbilical cord has to be clamped. And then the placenta passes out of the mother's body in the same way that the baby did. So nowadays, once the baby is born, they encourage you to feed your baby straight away. And the most natural method of feeding a baby is breastfeeding. So here, while it says breastfeeding is better than bottle feeding, it's better for the baby, but it may not necessarily be better for the mother. So people will choose what works for them. One of the advantages of breast milk, though, is that straight away it contains antibodies from the mum that will protect the baby from infection. Babies, once they're born, their immune system is brand new. They come with no antibodies. So through breastfeeding, they can have antibodies for as long as they continue to be breastfed. And one of the really cool things with breast milk is that while it contains all of the food and nutrients, water, salts that the baby needs, the composition of breast milk changes as the baby's requirements change. So as the baby gets older, so if you had breast milk at day 1 of life and you compared it to breast milk 6 months later, it would be very, very different. So it changes as the baby grows, which is kind of cool. But as we say, while it's best for baby, it has to be best for mum, so mums should do what makes them feel good. In terms of then prevention of fertilization, you can use contraception, and contraception is the removing the possibility of fertilization and implantation, and it can be done in a number of ways. So you can have what are called natural methods. So these two methods are what are called natural contraception methods. So the first one is abstinence, and that just means you avoid having sex, which makes sense. If you don't have sex, you shouldn't be able to get pregnant. And other methods are based on when a female's fertile period is and then not having sex during that time. You can use condoms. They're both male and female, and they prevent sperm entering your vagina. And these are called barrier methods because they literally prevent sperm from entering. There are things called sponges which females can insert into themselves, and they are also barrier methods. You can use contraceptive pill, which essentially stops eggs being produced and fools your body into thinking it's already pregnant. You can also include things called IUDs, and these will prevent implantation occurring should an egg be fertilized. So this is a chemical method. These are chemical methods of contraception. And the last one are surgical methods. So in females, it's a hysterectomy. I know I'm going to spell this wrong. So that can be where a uterus is removed or the fallopian tubes are tied, and in the male equivalent is a vasectomy. And that is where the sperm duct going from the testes toward the bladder is cut, and that means when a male ejaculates, sperm do not exit. So they are the different methods of contraception. Now we're just going to talk about one fertility treatment, but we're going to look at it in terms of the medical issues, the ethical issues, and the societal issues associated with it.
In vitro fertilization, or IVF, begins with the woman injecting fertility hormones that stimulate the ovaries to produce multiple eggs in 1 month. When the timing is optimal, a needle is passed into both ovaries, and all of the available eggs are captured in a test tube. A common IVF retrieval will yield 10 to 20 eggs. Fertilization then occurs in a petri dish. With standard IVF, we take tens of thousands of sperm and place them around each egg. However, if sperm counts are low, then we help the sperm with a procedure called ICSI, or intracytoplasmic sperm injection. With ICSI, we can take the best sperm and inject them directly into each egg, essentially eliminating male factor infertility. Fertilized eggs, or embryos, divide in our laboratory for 5 days. Typically, we choose the 2 best embryos for transfer into the uterus. The embryos will attach within the next 48 hours. If there are any extra embryos, we will freeze them for another pregnancy a couple of years down the road. With IVF, good candidates can expect pregnancy rates upwards of 50 to 60%.
Okay, so the issue would be that people are unable to conceive naturally, so they consider in vitro fertilization. And here your eggs are collected from your female, the sperm would be collected from the male, and fertilization would take place in your petri dish. So the zygotes that are made will be allowed to divide, and after 5 days they'd be implanted directly into the female uterus. So just in this little picture here, this device here is actually holding the egg in place, and that will allow it to be moved and implanted. So this is at the 2-cell stage, so it's already done from a zygote, it's already reproduced, the nucleus has reproduced twice. In terms of ethical issues, ethics just means whether or not something is right or wrong, and ethics is very personal to individuals. There would be a group of individuals that would see IVF being wrong because it isn't a natural method. They would have issues with the fact that not all embryos get implanted, that some would be destroyed or some might be used in stem cells. And then there's the flip side, is that there are people that think it's brilliant that stem cells are made. There have been cases where babies have been made via IVF for their bone marrow because they have a sibling that has leukemia and who would die without the bone marrow. So again, it's a personal choice whether or not you think of IVF as being right or wrong. And the last one is the societal issues involved with IVF. So depending on the country you're in, there'll be laws that will support IVF use, or there will be laws that will prevent its use outright. In Ireland at the moment, they're about to put in some laws that will allow people to use the public health system for IVF. The other issues that come with it, and in Ireland now we recognise that not all families are mums and dads, that you can have families that have two dads, and you can have families that have two moms, or you can have families that have only one mom or one dad, and these people would like to have children, and IVF can help make that happen for them, which is great. And there is where we are going to leave it. So I'm on Zoom for the second lesson of today, and the homework questions are attached to the assignment link, and you also need to go and find in the class notebook, class notes section, the page to update your note pictures. Thank you.